As a retail investor, one of the big challenges I find is overinvestment in specific industries. Things like financials, things like energy in the Canadian market that mean that if one of these industries get disrupted, a huge part of my stock portfolio is impacted. One of the best ways to solve this is to find other interesting, growing companies that are completely disconnected from these industries that I can invest into and diversify my portfolio. And today, one of the coolest Canadian companies has come across my personal watch list. It's a company called WSP Global. They're basically a giant engineering firm, and they're Canadian based. They do all sorts of really cool things around the world, and I really do want to talk to you about them. Welcome back to Golden Arch Investing. My name is Liam, and today, again, we're talking about a big Canadian company. On this channel, we talk all about investing in Canada. If that's something that you're interested in, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow along, all sorts of cool things to come. So what does this company do? Well, they brand themselves as a professional services firm, which when I first looked at the company made me scratch my head. I didn't really know what that was. I've never had the occasion to come across a professional services firm. But once I did dig into what they did, I was so interested because they have their fingers in the economies of countries around the world. And that's really interesting to me. One of the things that I find in Canadian companies is that while we do have some world-leading brands, think a Shopify, for example, that we talked about recently, there are a lot of companies in Canada that only exist because of Canadian regulation, that only exist because they specialize in this country, and so they're sort of limited. Their upside growth is capped by Canada. Well, these guys compete with the big dogs. They are an international company, and they can be anywhere around the world. So let's start off by really digging into what exactly this company does. And again, professional services didn't mean much to me when I first clicked on it. Basically, they help plan, design, build, and manage projects around the world. And by projects, I mean any building that needs to get built. So ports, transportation, energy, anywhere you might need an engineer, these guys are probably going to offer to be there. They divide their business into a couple of sectors. And as I was clicking through their Q3 earnings, I realized it would just be so much easier for me to explain to you guys what these sectors are based on what they're talking about and the projects they sort of advertise to help us understand what exactly this company is doing. So let's go through these sectors, starting off here with Earth and Environment. I should have this on the screen for you guys, but they talk about all sorts of different services that range from archaeology to waste management. So they develop strategies, they build policies, they build site management plans, they rehab sites, they do much more. So again here, any business or government that needs something done with either a large amount of earth that needs to be moved, environmental assessments that need to build policies for what people should or shouldn't do, that need to determine if something is safe to do, WSP has solutions. They have people who have the real technical expertise that they can send out to do that work and help these governments or businesses get the job done right, usually saving them money and making sure they pick the best solution. I think that's pretty cool. Let's move into our second sector here. Again, on the screen, we're talking about power and energy. And I'm going to quote WSP themselves here. They talk about themselves as the vanguard of the effort to decarbonize the global economy and meet the goal of net zero by 2050. So right away, I'm hearing renewable energy. Now, renewable energy has been hit really hard recently. And so that's kind of a red flag when I'm reading this, but I want to dig through this sort of sector so I can explain to you why I'm not too worried about them for the mid to long term here. So what exactly do they do? Well, here they say they offer advisory services, planning, permitting support, engineering design, program and project management, and more. They argue that they take a future-ready approach in this regard and have positioned themselves in an enviable position to receive more and more investment as more companies become interested in energy solutions. So when I look at that, all of a sudden, the red flags that I was seeing when I heard renewables, and I'm sort of worried about, this maybe underinvestment era in renewable energies that people are talking about. And now I turn my brain and I think about power. What has everyone been talking about for the last year? Artificial intelligence. And over the last couple of months, it's all been about how do we power these data centers? Well, let's think about what maybe a Google or a Microsoft would be looking for. They would be looking for somebody who could help them pick the best solution. it looks like a WSP could be there. It looks like they have the expertise to help those companies. Really interesting. Then you think about, well, now that we're building out all this infrastructure, governments are also looking at building out additional power supplies, building out resiliency, trying to handle the question of power storage with renewables, right? There's all these huge questions, and you're going to need a huge number of really, really talented people to solve them. Again, that's where this kind of company comes in. So as the world keeps growing and our technology keeps evolving and we keep sort of demanding more power and looking for better ways to do things, these guys are going to be there. I think that's pretty interesting personally. There's still all sorts of things that we should look at here, because I'm going to toss the revenue growth numbers up here, but they're going up quite impressive. We're looking at 386 million about 5 years ago, 2019, 787 in 2023. So about double this sector alone in the last 5 years. And they're talking about all sorts of really, really interesting projects that they've been a part of, which makes me think that even though, yes, they're talking about themselves as a huge brand in the world of decarbonizing and renewable energy, that doesn't mean that they don't have experts, or they couldn't have experts onboarded to work on projects that are dealing with fossil fuels. In Alberta, we've been talking a lot about the idea of like a hydrocarbon future where we deal with hydrogen power and things like that. You're going to need engineers to solve those problems. If that's the kind of direction that governments are going, that doesn't mean WSP can't benefit. Just because right now they're really focused on this sort of renewable sector. They can always pivot. They can always have people that do those tasks, because they're not the ones building the projects and paying for it and running those power sites. They're just the ones designing it or working on planning it or helping build a management plan, right? So they'll benefit either way. It doesn't really matter to them specifically if the projects are the ones they've been doing or if we have new ones coming down the pipeline. Okay, our next sector here, we're talking about transportation and infrastructure. Again, I'm going to toss some stuff on the screen here for you. And I'm not going to lie, guys, I found this so cool. And I guess it's the social studies teacher in me that just thought that so much of what they're doing here is just so interesting. They talk about 130 years of technical excellence, offering holistic approaches to the transportation and infrastructure planning and advisory, design, and management. So they're talking about projects from rail to aviation to bridges and everything in between. But some of the things I found the most interesting are projects like their ports built around the world, from countries like Canada to Sweden and South Africa. Found this segment more than any other had me feeling like I was going through a rabbit hole. And I discovered they were part of cool projects like a cruise port in the Bahamas, iron ore projects in Western Australia. Just, they're all over. And because they're all over, they're able to benefit from growth in all of these different markets. So if we're worried about a stagnating Canadian economy, even if you're worried about US tariffs, WSP can probably make it through those sorts of systems no matter what, because they're going to be in other places benefiting from other expansion. Super cool. Our fourth segment here, we're going to talk about really quickly, property and buildings. They talk about themselves as a world-leading management and technical consultancy ecosystem that works together with clients to understand design challenges, create iconic buildings that meet the needs, again, of clients. Ooh, deep breath there. And so this includes everything from rec facilities to massive commercial towers to logistical hubs. They're just so many buildings all over. And actually, I found it really interesting. I've seen a fair number of these buildings around the world, and especially here in Canada, right? Super cool. And again, they're just part of the economy of so many different places. And they seem to benefit from everything happening. So when governments are working on, redesigning a landfill, they profit. When developers are working on building out transportation infrastructure to a new subdivision, they can profit. When governments are building ports for cruise ships in the Caribbean, they can profit. When, people or companies need new office towers built in major metropolises around the world, they can profit. They're everywhere. And their services are all based on just having really, really good people. And it seems like they've just done that really well. Their scale, their sort of range of services they offer, it all speaks to a really talented workforce. And I think that's one thing that a Canadian company can do just as well as any other, as long as they're in the right places, doing the right things, which it seems like WSP does. So professional services really is the best way to describe this company. It seems like they do everything. And now that I'm sort of looking at the company, I have an understanding of what they do, which is so much. Now my question really is, what has caused them to run up so much in stock price over the last 5, 10 plus years? This stock chart is absolutely beautiful. And while it's not a perfectly straight line up like some of the stocks we've seen this last year, it has been steadily growing through thick and thin, through economic downturns. They just keep growing. And one of the things they do really well that I've noticed is their growth of the company. I mean, look at these numbers. We're looking at a 5-year revenue compound annual growth rate of 11% with an earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation, amortization compound annual growth rate of 18%. So they're continually getting more profitable as they grow the business. That's pretty good. And both of those are double-digit numbers. They've also managed to catch the ESG trend. So the environmental, social, and governance trend. And really that trend has brought a lot of investment into different sectors that these guys have been able to help people work on. So when you're talking about a company that's working on installing solar panels on their offices, right? And all these different things, WSP has been there. And that makes me think they're probably going to catch the next trend. So if that maybe is a return to sort of hydrocarbons, if that's a focus on sort of domestic production, right? All these companies are thinking, oh, I got to build manufacturing here in the most efficient way possible, either in the United States, in Canada, in these other countries around the world that are trying to sort of onshore production that's left. These guys might be there offering solutions, right? So just because they've sort of caught the last trend doesn't make me think they'll miss the next one. It actually makes me think they're going to be in pole position to catch it and help with all of this, again, big spurt in development in all these different sectors that need engineers and other professionals. It's not just engineers, but they need these same kinds of services. Really, really interesting, I think. Now, let's talk about one additional thing that I think is really, really cool. And this is totally separate from the business here, but their 10-year total return compound annual growth rate. So the total amount every year that you're making from this company, I'll show it to you guys here, 23.5% every year. That blows most Canadian stocks out of the water. Just an incredible return. And it's just accelerating. And again, because of the magic of compounding, this thing is flying high. Now that does make me think it might be a little bit expensive, but again, I think they're in pole position to catch all of these trends moving forward. So I think actually they could ramp up their growth, and they've been really, really good at ramping up their profitability recently. I don't see any reason why that would stop. Like I mentioned earlier, when building a portfolio, a lot of what I'm focused on is making it resilient, building for the future, looking for that medium, long-term sort of time frame. I'm thinking about companies that are just outperforming peers. And I think WSP hits all those numbers. Now, again, I'm not an expert in the professional services field. I'm barely even an amateur when it comes to learning about this sector. But I do think it has some really, really interesting return profiles. It presents a great opportunity, and at least has for the last 10 plus years, to investors. And when it comes to the world of Canadian stocks, when you have gems like this that are just so vastly outperforming most of their peers, it feels like you just have to hop on board. Do I know that this company is going to continue this amazing growth over the next 10 years? Of course not. I have no idea. But I do know that this company presents all the kinds of things I'm looking for when it comes to investing in a growing Canadian company that competes well with international peers, that is able to address these massive market demands all over the world, and that has consistently demonstrated outperformance. That's something I really think is really cool, and I would love to be invested in. Now, those are just my thoughts on this company. If you are somebody who knows this company, maybe you've invested in it before, let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you think I'm totally up the wrong path and there's actually other companies that have better opportunities, so maybe they haven't made their runs yet, or they're just starting, on this path of profitability and growth, let me know as well. I would love to hear about that. And if there's other Canadian companies you would like me to talk about, please drop that in the comments down below. Again, we talk about investing in Canada every week on this channel. With that being said, that's all I have for you guys today. So I hope you have a great one, and I'll see you in the next video.